So now we're starting Ayurvedic nutrition, AC 102. And our first lesson that we are starting off with is basically what is the difference between Western nutrition and Ayurvedic nutrition. So we have like about 11 slides that just talk about Western nutrition. And that is for information purposes only. If you've never studied uh, Western nutrition, please go through them. And rest of you, I know a lot of you have already studied it. So that's just for info. The idea is we want to, and why do we need to do this Western nutrition versus Ayurvedic nutrition as lesson one instead of just doing Ayurvedic nutrition? Because when you do get your clients and you're telling them do not eat so much protein or, reduce your, increase your carbohydrate, for instance, or have more oil in your diet. And they will usually tell you things that they have learned from Western nutrition, but I need my protein. And fat is not good for me. Low fat is better. So you should be able to, or they might tell you, I went to my physician or RD and they asked me to take vitamin D12 and vitamin D, or I'm on this supplement or whatever. So if you do not know that, you will be able to educate your client and convince them as you do your interventions with them. That is the only thing. For those of you who haven't studied that's the only reason we're doing it, because the aim and objective of the presentation is that you should be able to sell the idea of Ayurvedic nutrition to your client. They've paid you money, they walked in, you've given them advice. If they don't take it, it's kind of a, it's a bad thing. We want people to take our advice and actually use it and feel good about themselves. So that's where I'm coming from. Like I said, the Western nutrition part is home study. This basically, let's start off with right here. So what is the focus of Western nutrition? Herein there is a little, you have your serving size, which of course everybody cheats on. They will not say this is, there's 25 servings in this thing. People just think, oh my God, it's only 50 calories. But you have to divide it into 25 parts for it to be 50 calories or whatever. So it's all about calories. Everything's about calories. Then you have the fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, carb, protein, and what's not. Ayurveda is not like that. Let me just write that down here. We don't care about calories. We don't care about this. Pretty much. Then what do we care about? What we care about is, so Ayurvedic nutrition is the taste rasa, which is part of the energetics. Food has energy. And you will read about the different energetics that include rasa and virya, which is whether the food is heating or cooling, and gunas and prabhava, the action and whatnot. Right now, for this AC 102, we are only interested in rasa. And then how does the food affect the mind? That means it makes our mind either sattvic, pure, tamasic, a little lazy, or rajasic, makes it run. And so what are the 6 rasas and how does it affect the mind? These are the 2 things that in AC 102, that's what we're interested in. And what is the most important consideration for rasa? It is the body constitution. Right? See the difference. Western nutrition, carbs, fats, protein, fiber. In Ayurveda, protein, fiber, and carbs, all 3 of them are earth element. I'm just going to write E here. E means earth element. Earth element. Earth element. Carbohydrate is earth element. Protein is earth element. Not every single carb is earth element. Some of them are not earth elements. Most of them are. Fat is a water element. Does it make sense? So instead of saying the nutrients are associated with taste or rasa, right off the bat, is it making sense? We don't care about calories, whatever, because we are not counting calories. We are looking at the rasa corresponds to the nutrients, the micronutrients. Fats are water element, mostly fiber. All fiber is earth element. Protein is all earth element. Carb mostly is earth element. Sometimes it's not, but mostly. And we don't really, Ayurvedic, we don't really want artificially, and we wanted also how the food is cooked as well. So I'm going to save this part as well. Any question about this slide? Okay. Connor, if you're still there, please keep on answering. All right. So if you look at it, Ayurvedic nutrition is looking at the 6 rasas, the body type, constitution, and energetics. Okay. All right. So in Western nutrition, they care about, basically you have the macronutrients and micronutrients. And within the macronutrients, I right now just want to talk about fats for a second, proteins for a second. Why? Because the Western nutrition doesn't care about where your protein is coming from, a plant-based diet or an animal-based diet. Because usually the Western nutrition will believe, plant protein sources may not contain all the essential amino acids. How many times have I had that? If I had a penny for every time someone said I need my protein because I need to have a lot more animal-based foods, then you're asking me to reduce what? So this is something you will, if you don't already have this discussion with your clients when you're trying to suggest more plant-based diet, you will have. And that's why we want us to know everything we need to know about protein so we can tell them. So that is one discussion you tend to have. Because we, from our perspective, we are not saying become a vegetarian, but we are saying that essentially your diet should be plant-based. Does that make sense? And if they want to become a vegetarian, that's fine. But essentially, 85–90% of the diet should be plant-based. That's the idea. And this is basically, talking about carbohydrates, fiber, protein, fats, and different vitamins. And the reason you want to know about vitamins, if you already know it, of course, don't bother reading this. But if you do not know, at least print it out and have it, because when you start getting clients, you will ask them what are the supplements that they're taking, and they will usually tell you, I'm taking these supplements. So you want to know these. All right. Exactly. Exactly. So in the US, the food guidelines are set by the FDA based on the Western nutrition. So one of the things that we ask you to do, and you're going to enjoy that, and I can show you some My Plate as well, and maybe I'll show it in the next class. So before we used to have the pyramid, which was so confusing, nobody understood it. And then, of course, 9 years ago, when Michelle Obama became the first lady, she took a lot of interest in this. And of course, Choose My Plate came. And honestly, I think it's a really good idea because look at the amount of vegetables, how much that has been increased. And protein, if you think about it, it's pretty less, right? Unfortunately, what happens is you have dairy. That is also protein, right? So you should not, so if you think about it, it increases the amount of protein. And it doesn't care, what is the rasas of the fruit. And also like Ayurveda, we will not mix raw food together with cooked food. So, we had students do a comparison between the Harvard My Plate, which talks about fresh fruits and whole grains and whatnot. And then we also have students make a My Plate. So My Plate for Vata, My Plate for Kapha, My Plate for Pitta person. I think we have sent you one little My Plate already. Didn't we do one My Plate? Just to give you an example. So basically the Western nutritionists that, one size fits all. And I mean, honestly, I think this is a great idea because it's such a huge improvement over the pyramid. And if I don't know if anybody's got hospitalized. I mean, I just had a baby 4 years ago, so I was in the hospital. I was pleasantly surprised that they came in and they gave me a menu, and they had to check one thing from each thing that they were giving. I thought that was pretty great. Of course, I refused to eat anything from that place and Atul was cooking for me. I'm not, why are you giving raw food to a woman who's just had a C-section? She's not going to have the Agni. But honestly, I think it's still a huge improvement. So one of the things, let's go back to here. One of the things that, the My Plate is, it doesn't care if your vegetables are fresh, organic, whether they're local or they have been flown from Argentina, whether it's canned or processed. What happens if any preservatives were added, so artificial chemicals were added. So what happens from Ayurvedic perspective, food processing basically changes the Mahabhuta of the food. So some of the processing that's done in Western is, number one, let's see, there's a lot of chat happening. Oh, you're not one of them, Sarah. She's not one of them. She's the good guy. Okay. Of course, you're the good guy, doctor. Okay. Food processing is kind of very important. And the reason, Olga and I, when we were making this presentation, we decided to talk about it is, at that time, we think we made this in 2010 or 11, this presentation. We were getting a lot of students who were eating raw food and telling them, do not eat raw food. They're like, but all the enzymes are dead. And we said, okay, we need to talk about this a little bit more. So we want to talk about food processing. And it's true that food processing will kill a little bit of enzymes and reduce the amount of nutrition in the food. Yes, however, let's first do it, and I'll tell you the reason why we suggest cooked food over raw food, specifically for someone who's in a vata condition or recovering from an illness. Now, when you cook something, cooking includes boiling, frying, sautéing, right? Roasting, baking. All of that is kind of cooking because you're using. Then, of course, you have drying. You can dry. So what happens when you put something for baking? It basically dries out the water content in something, right? So if you've ever put vegetables in an oven, they kind of start drying out, right? That's what's happening. And that's the same thing happened in a food dehydrator and in a sun. Then freezing there's flash freezing now. And of course, there's the old-fashioned freezing as well. Canning. So canning, before it used to be adding a lot of, have you ever had, even if you get organic beans or something in a can, it's really salty and it has all these preservatives added. So traditionally, salt or sugar were used as a preservative. Nowadays, they also add other chemicals. But salt or sugar were the traditional preservatives that were added. Pickling, fermentation in a brine, marinating in an acid solution like vinegar. Refining, this is the worst thing that they do. It's like salt. They take out all the things that are important, basically stripping nutrition from the whole grain and then adding vitamins or something extra on the top of that after stripping it from all nutrition so that it has a longer shelf life and has a finer texture. This is something. And the reason why they're adding, it's called fortifying. Why are they adding vitamins? Some things FDA wants them to add. For example, there are places in US that they found out some years ago that people didn't have enough vitamin D because there's not enough sun. So they said you have to add vitamin D to all milk. And they are adding vitamin D to milk because first they heat, homogenize, and pasteurize milk to such a high temperature to kill bacteria that they also kill the nutrition. Now that they have heated and killed all the nutrition, they add vitamins to it, including vitamin D. Okay, there's also ultra pasteurizing, and I have another article I wrote on that we can talk about. Homogenizing is basically, I don't know if any of you, when I was growing up in India, when you got milk, there was always cream on top. You know what I'm saying? There's no more cream on top anymore. Now what they do is they basically take the cream, the molecules of the fat, and they do this intense blending. So they break down the molecules of the cream or the fat. So the milk and the fat, milk and the cream is one, but that is not natural. That has now been changed. So ideally, milk and cream should separate. The only thing that I found was the Strauss milk. I'll write it down. I'm not, and yes, we do not believe in raw milk in Ayurveda. I wrote an article on it. I will share it with you. Strauss is a brand from, maybe there's more. That's the only one that I know of. They're from California, up in Northern California. They do not, so you have their, if you buy their milk, it's organic and of course grass-fed cows and stuff. And they have, the cream is on the top. They even have ice creams and whatnot. And that's the milk that you can make paneer or different whey out of. You cannot really use, milk can be used for making whey and making paneer and whatnot. You can't really do it out of homogenized milk. And like I said, there's batch pasteurizing, and ultra pasteurizing. Again, I'm going to share that info with you. And then, of course, they add preservatives like sugar. Sodium benzoate is in everything in India. I hate that. The thing is, if you, like, I was up in Whole Foods the other day, and was it Whole Foods or Sprouts? I can't remember. And there was this organic tortilla, and I picked it up. I said, oh, wow, it's already ready-made. It's organic. It's made of, all these nice things. And I looked at the back, organic, whatever, corn, organic, wheat. And it had like 6 preservatives. I'm like, if you're organic, why are you adding preservatives? Because if they don't add preservatives, it won't have a shelf life. And if it won't have a shelf life, then they can't sell it. That's what I get told. I would rather take sugar over artificial chemicals anyway, if I had to get something from outside. And why are they adding all these? Can you think of an artificial chemical? I mean, look at the stuff they add. I mean, just the, you can add beet powder or spinach powder or turmeric powder to give beautiful food coloring. Like, the fish crackers that the kids have, they're actually using spinach, beet, and turmeric to add color and natto. But if you look at all these colorful, so-called healthy tortillas that they sell, they add artificial colors to it. I mean, the same artificial colors that are in lipsticks. And of course, you don't even want to get me started on MSG. It is responsible for so many problems. But if you've ever worried about weight gain, MSG can actually trigger obesity in rats. All of them. I mean, turmeric is the best food coloring. On April 4th, Antonia, if you're there, you should come. I'm part of the Earth Day at Radha Madhav Dham, and they asked me, can you do some Ayurvedic activity with the kids? And I'm thinking, what should I do? I can't think of what I'm going to do. So at first I thought I can help them make some soaps or herbs. And it's supposed to be an activity for children. Then I thought we will do some cooking and we'll add some Ayurvedic food coloring. So we are doing Ayurvedic food coloring experiments. We're going to use turmeric. I'm also going to use moringa and tell them how moringa can be used to detoxify water, and talk about, penicillin. And it's a natural, it actually has shown the research was done here in UT San Antonio. And moringa has been shown to have the same effects as, so it has a strong effect on gram-positive bacteria. So we're going to put some moringa in dirty water to see if it detoxifies it. It's more like a science fair. I feel like I'm going to science fair. I just didn't know what else to do. I'm such a nerd, It was either that or make perfumes or make soaps, which is too time consuming. It's April 4th. It's Earth Day. So as part of Earth Day. Yeah, I'll share with you. Don't worry. And what is it that Ayurveda is okay with doing? So this is the stuff we are not okay with doing. We don't want to add artificial chemicals. Ayurveda does add preservatives. Ayurvedic preservatives include sugar and mustard seeds and ghee and oil. And then of course we like to do this. We will also do drying, but only in the sun. Sun dried is okay. No freezing. Thank you very much. Freezing will kill the prana. We are okay with pickling, and we love fermentation because fermentation actually is one of the top ways of a very, very old ancient Ayurvedic ways of but the fermentation, not in a brine, not necessarily in a salted solution. We ferment and pickle by using spices. Like I make a fermented drink with carrot, which maybe Connor you'll get to do with beets. It's called kanji. So we will take a little bit of black carrots and beets and add some mustard seeds to it, and leave it and let the bacteria act on it and let it ferment into a drink. Or we will add turmeric and a couple of spices in it to pickle it. So if you've ever had an Indian pickle, it's like we never ever use an acid solution, because that kind of pickle would be really, really, it might be okay for a Vata person, but for Pitta that might not be okay. And why is it that we are okay with the cooking and sun drying, but not oven or food dehydrator? Why are we not okay with homogenizing or pasteurizing? We are okay if it's less than 60 seconds. Preservatives, we are not okay. Adding freezing, we are not okay. Canning, we are not okay. Why not? Because it kills the prana. So in the beginning, I talk about, how the myplate.gov, it has vegetables, fruits, proteins, whatnot, but it doesn't consider where your food is coming from. We want food that is, the fresher the food, the more prana it has. Basically, processing changes the inherent qualities of food. There are many types of processing common in the Western diet that kill prana. What is this prana? What is prana? How are we getting prana in our body? So if you have studied yoga, which all of you seem to have done, we know prana is your vitality, yes? Prana is also a subdosha of vata. Prana can come from food. So if you're eating fresh food, I mean, take a fresh organic strawberry versus, which is local, or it didn't have to travel far, versus something that had to travel far, or something that is canned or tinned. You can't even compare the two. It doesn't even taste this. It is tasteless food, right? Have you ever had, fresh vegetable versus which was something in a can or tin or frozen? There is no taste left because there is no life. It's like a dead body. It's a dead body of a beans or okra. Yeah. I like one thing. I used to work with another physician. I could never get people to give up microwave. And I would ask her, everybody she met would give up using microwave. She would say things like, microwave is chemotherapy for your foods. And people would get so like, wow. And yeah. And then she would get all these patients who were chronic illnesses, and they would all give up microwave. I know, magic. It was magic. She would say it and they would give it up. With me, not everybody does that. But yeah, I love to use that. Microwaving is chemotherapy for your food. So don't cook in a microwave. It kills prana, and it basically inherently changes there's biochemical changes within the food when you're doing that. And if I cannot convince someone to give a microwave, I said, okay, use it for 30 seconds just to heat up, but do not more, something like that, like a compromise. I mean, prana comes from breath. We know this. Prana comes from food, and this is part of our ahara. Ahara means what is ingested. So one of the things sometimes you see, we call the nutrition, we call it ahar. Ahar means what we take in. What is it that you take in? You take in three things. You digest and eat your thoughts, your breath, and your food. So we are not talking about thoughts and breath today. We're just talking about food. What is in the food that we want to take in? The best food for when we want to say food is medicine. Eat more vegetables. I mean, let's say if it's winter time and somebody doesn't have access to any fresh food at all, then it is okay, they can have organic frozen food. But if they have access to fresh food, if I had a choice between organic and canned and local and non-organic, I will take local and non-organic always, because local food always has the same dosha. It has been exposed to the same wind, same sun, same soil as you. So the local is always top. Why is it we don't want canned foods? I mean, canned foods are sitting on shelves. So there's something I found out just recently, and I was a little. So most of the bread, even organic bread that you see in your grocery stores, it actually arrives in cold storage. It has been frozen and thawed. I just found that out like last week. I was like, what? Seriously? Yeah, so it has been frozen and thawed. So there is no pran. It might be organic. So always, one of the things you could do is if you have a tortiteria, I don't know, is that, am I saying it correctly? Torteria? Tortiteria. How do you say it? Tortelleria. Anyway, the place where they make tortillas, right? Fresh tortillas. There's a few here. How do you say it? Torteria. Torteria. Okay. I don't know how to say it. It is, you know, they make these very simple with corn masa. They'll take some corn masa and they will make some tortillas, and it's fresh tortillas, and it's uncooked sometimes, and you can just buy, and they're so cheap. And if you cannot cook yourself, you can just get those. That's 1,000 times better than buying bread. Bread has yeast in it. It has not been fermented properly. A proper fermentation, like sourdough bread, is properly fermented. Ayurveda believes in fermentation, but for example, I make this. I'm from North India. I make naan. So you guys, all the Canadians, Punjabis, naan bread. A good naan bread is actually by using buttermilk. So when I make my naan, I will take the wheat flour. I'll put flax seeds in it. I'll put whole wheat in it. I'll put bran in it. I will put buttermilk in it, and I will ferment it for 48 hours. There's a little stinky smell that starts coming, and then I'm ready to make it. How are they making naan here in the restaurants locally? They put yeast. It's done in 2 hours. That is not done. It is not broken down properly. So I've had people who say that they are not, they're just a little sensitive to gluten, not celiac or anything like that. And then they come and I make the naan, and I also make my naan really small. And I'll put onion seeds on it, and I'll put flaxseed and whatnot, and of course it'll be colored with turmeric, and it's pretty tasty. And then usually they'll say, I'll just taste it because I don't like it. And I've had people who have claimed that they don't like gluten, and they've consumed 10 of them. 10. And I'm like, are you okay? I mean, you're eating a lot of these. And then they go home, no problem, because it was fermented properly. Fermentation is the key. So most of the bread, most of the naan, they're using yeast. If you can find, I know in HEB, they actually, I was surprised here, the local store, HEB, they're not using yeast, they're using natural cultures. I was very surprised. It's a regular grocery store. So if you have a local bakery that has a sourdough bread that they actually use natural processes, natural cultures, and they're not using yeast, that bread is okay. Or tortilla is okay. Tortilla is like easy, super easy to do. So, if you have a choice when you're telling, people eat too much bread, too much bread. And bread is what? What is that? Yeast is air and space. It's increasing vata. But if it's fermented properly with, the bacteria has broken down everything, it is a lot better. It is easier to digest. Does it make sense? And then, of course, fried foods, I think eating from outside should absolutely be not, because they're using the same oil. What happens to oil in high heats? And the food is getting fried and refried in the same oil. That is the problem. I mean, even when I do Shirodhara, after doing Shirodhara, I throw away the oil. I don't even want to use it on the same person. Yeah. Yesterday I made, I know this is another fact. The day before yesterday, I said, okay, my little 4-year-old, he doesn't eat any vegetables except carrots and cucumbers. So I said, I'm going to be very smart. I took some, spinach, and I put it in my tortilla, and I made some roti. We call it roti. And he said, Mommy, why is my quesadilla green? I said, oh, I put food coloring in it. And he said, it's green, it looks yucky, and he threw it away. They have this, children have sixth sense about healthy food, let me tell you. So I don't know, I'm going to try and another strategy for him to have his greens. All right, save, clear. Anyway, so what is the aim and objective of the story? Invest in nutrition, one size fits all. Eating guidelines are vague. For example, have this much protein, and they don't even care where the protein is coming from, right? We care about that. I mean, just right here, if you look at this, dairy is also protein, and this is protein. So how can this be? So that makes really the protein the biggest thing. And it shouldn't be the biggest thing. Specifically for a kapha person, should always have less protein and less grain and more vegetables. For vata person, this would be a better plate. So let's go back to prana. Ayurveda considers more than the nutritional value, more than the micronutrients and macronutrients. It considered prana. So certain foods that are filled with prana, we always want to eat more of these. If someone is, let's say you have a postpartum mom or someone who's just had a surgery, or they're recovering from illness, at that time you want to give them food which are easy to digest and have prana. So you don't want to give them raw food. You want to cook the food, and you also want to make sure it's local food and it's fresh vegetables. Anything that has little or no prana, you want to avoid it. Anything, for example, beans and legumes and whole grains, they can retain their prana for years and years and years and years. Even nuts. So if you have them in an airtight container, they can retain their prana for a long time. So if you, instead of buying canned, if you have like garbanzo beans or black beans or kidney beans or black-eyed peas and whatnot, you can actually, if you have it in your pantry and it's in a nice airtight container, you can, the only problem with cooking those things is you have to soak them a night in advance. Ayurveda wants that we should soak all our beans and legumes. Otherwise, next morning, people will start, they become gassy if you have food. So we add herbs like ingu, and we make sure the food is always, whether it's grains or legumes, it's always soaked. And as a general rule, anything that is plant-based and fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, legumes and grains, and I'm not talking about grain powder. So the reason I mentioned corn masa, you have the coarse corn masa, it retains a prana for a long, long time. And I mean, there is no prana in animal-based foods. It's a dead body. How can a dead body have prana? Prana is left. So there is no prana there. Now, when in Ayurveda, when we are talking about animal-based foods, we are not talking about milk, because the animal was not killed for milk. And we are not talking about honey. We are specifically, at this point, I'm talking about the flesh. What are foods high in prana? Fresh foods, organic, locally. This is the best. Obviously, we don't live in a textbook society where we get all of these three. It is easy to get locally grown, organic, fresh in summer. Everywhere you have, farmers markets and whatnot. I don't know how it is in Finland. Henry, maybe you can tell us. Is it also farmers market are popular in Canada also? And of course, Sarah is in Hawaii, so she only eats fresh foods probably. I'm talking about Sarah Cannon. And Sarah Moore, you're in California, right? So you probably go to a farmer's market all year round. So yeah, depending on where you live, right? Oh, you're in Canada. Do you have a lot of farmers market? I'm just wondering because I don't know. Yeah, so if you can go to a farmer's market, you can find locally grown, you can find locally grown and organic. And it's very important that things are not homogenized or genetically modified. It's kind of important. And obviously, you want to bake or cook fresh and not have it. Let's say you buy organic, fresh vegetable, you cook it, and you. I just had someone, I was talking to one of the moms at my son's school, and she was saying, I was complaining I don't have time for a play date. And she said, well, you should do what I do. I just cook the entire 7 days for Sunday and I freeze it and we just take it out. And I had to bite my lip because it's hard for me not to make comments. So that is not Ayurvedic. 7 days of frozen. So we do, maximum maybe 1 or 2 days. 2 is like the maximum. After 2 days, I'll throw everything out of the fridge. Cooked food. You cannot put stuff in the freezer because it loses its pran. What I'm saying is specifically for someone who's unwell or who's recovering from an issue, you want to focus on these things. Yeah, absolutely. No, but there was another question I wanted to answer, which none of you have asked yet. When we cook a food, especially we want to cook foods because cooked foods are easier to digest, right? Especially for Vata Kapha person, cooked foods are more easy to digest. But yes, cooking the food kills pran. Not all of the pran, so we are not overcooking the food, we are cooking it a little bit, right? But why is it cooking more important when we are giving so much emphasis on pran? Because cooking makes the nutrients bioavailable. Does it make sense? Yes, exactly. And foods that we want to avoid, and I want to use the word avoid because really life, you will have clients who may or may not, you know, it's, you don't want to have them a 360 lifestyle change in one day, right? So one step at a time. You want to so one of the questionnaires when you have a person, what are they eating? I'll give you one example. I had a young Indian boy. He was in his early 20s. He was a new engineer. He had come here, and he had only been in US 10 months, and he was having a lot of health issues. And he's a single boy, and he came to me, and I was looking at his form that he shared with me. So this is what he ate. He ate processed food from the Indian store for breakfast, processed frozen food for lunch, and processed canned food for dinner, and processed and frozen food for snack. There was not anything. And I said, why are you eating it from Indian store? It has no taste. He says, I miss India. For him, it was all about missing India. He had never even had these foods in his entire life. Poor child. I send him, I said, first thing I sent, I said, what do you miss most? I miss roti, which is kind of like tortilla. I said, have you been to tortilla? Go there and eat. He didn't know. So I send him there so he could start buying fresh. And I said, you have to add at least fruits to your diet every day. He wasn't even eating fruits. So we added fruits to his diet. And then instead of frozen food, I said, you have to add one thing that is organic and locally grown to one of your meals, either breakfast, lunch, or dinner every day. So slowly we brought him back from this, because for him it was not even about this. It was about, I miss India. I miss my country. So these are the things that kind of tell you what's happening. So that was all his diet was, this and coffee. Don't even get me started on coffee right now. We'll do that later. I know some of you are going to argue with me over coffee, right? Okay. Well, I'm a tea person, so I have no problem. I'm not doing ojas today. Let's leave ojas because it's a 1 hour topic by itself. So Panchamahabhutas, we know you have ether, air, fire, water, earth. All organic matter is a combination of elements. The bottom line is that we know that space and air, or ether and air, make vata, right? Fire and water make pitta, and water and earth make kapha. So in order to balance these Mahabhutas, we always have the opposite Mahabhuta. Every food we eat is also made of Mahabhuta. Just to ask you, right? For example, I had already answered that. What do you think is whole wheat? What about whole wheat? What is whole wheat? Earth element. Will we give it to Kapha person? Yes or no? We will try and then avoid it. What about dairy? Dairy is what? What element is dairy? It is water element. It's a water element and it has a combination because it's protein. It also has earth element. We want to avoid it for kapha. What about hot habanero peppers? What element are they? It is not pitta. It is fire element. So we want to avoid that for a pitta person. What about beans, as in legumes, as in pinto beans, kidney beans, red beans, black beans? They are air and space. What about leafy green vegetables? Does anybody know that? Anybody? Leafy green salad is all air and space. So if you're a vata person or you're a pitta person or a kapha person, right now your vata is a little bit out of balance. Do I want to give you leafy green salad? What will happen if I give you leafy green salad? It'll increase your air and space. So for that time, I want to avoid it. So the idea is root vegetables, for example, are mostly earth element. And many of them are kapha. The only exception is carrot. Carrot is actually a diuretic. It actually decreases the amount of water in your body. Otherwise, most of them, turnip, parsnip, yucca. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Yucca, akka. Let me write that down. Is that yucca is the right way to say it? Anything that kind of grows on the in earth, potatoes, yam, all of these are root earthy vegetables. So for vata person, they're awesome. So someone who wants to avoid kapha thinks they should avoid these things. So I'm just trying to give you that this is the formulation that we use in the Pancha Mahabhuta. Another thing is, for example, you have food like mushrooms. Mushrooms are considered tamasic and dull. So if you're consuming things like mushrooms, mushrooms are good. It's a good thing. But if you're having too much mushroom will make a person heavy and dull. So a kapha person should avoid it. So herein we are not even considering whether it's earth element or not. We're considering whether it is sattvic, tamasic, or rajasic. For example, ghee, even though it is earthish, it increases kapha, but it is sattvic. That means it purifies and calms the mind. Right? So obviously if you're vata and pitta person, you don't even think about giving it. But if I want to give ghee to a kapha person, it will increase the kapha. So how do I give it? I give very small amounts or I give an alternative. So not only are we thinking the Pancha Mahabhutas and the taste and the elements, we are also thinking whether something is tamasic and rajasic and sattvic. Does it make sense? Did Atul talk about rajas, tamas, and I think we talked about that in yoga therapy, didn't we? Does everybody know what sattva, tamas, rajas is? Okay. I just have one more slide to go. Yeah. So this is what I was talking about. I'm going to try and finish this next week also. Like I said, it's a lot of information in one slideshow. Just like everything is made of elements, taste is also made of element. So sweet taste is made of water and fire, or earth and water. Sweet taste is made of earth and water. That means it is going to increase kapha because earth and water are kapha elements. Salty is water and fire. Too much of it will actually lead to water retention because it increases that much water. A little bit of fire, but mostly a lot of water. It'll increase both pitta and kapha. Because pitta is both fire and water. Sour, earth and fire again. So this is again something, I think you already have this in your study aids. Print this out and memorize it. You need to know this. Memorize it. There's no way. You need to, the minute you know, need to astringent is air and earth element. Pungent is fire and earth element. Bitter is earth. So rasa and its element. Please memorize it. And these are some examples. Sour is citrus, lemon, tamarind, yogurt. Why yogurt? Because yogurt is considered sour unless you've made it, fresh at home. And within that 24 hours, it's not sour. But after 24 hours, especially the store-bought yogurt that has been sitting there for a long time, is, sweet, thick yogurt that we have in. So Indian yogurt is not thick. It's kind of thin, and we always make it fresh. Astringent is legumes, pomegranate, dry bananas, plantains, raw fruits. Pungent is onion, garlic, mustard, cayenne pepper, habanero peppers, ghost peppers, radishes, horseradish. Bitter is dark leafy green. Bitter is also bitter melon, and so on. So you should actually memorize this. Ayurveda does not use chemical additives to preserve food. We prefer sugar, salt, ghee, and we prefer pickling and sun drying. Why? Because the Mahabhautik composition, by processing and cooking, the element changes. For example, if you drink water, right? Water is considered heavy because it's water element. Now you boil this water, and now you cool it down a little bit. Now it's only warm. Now it is okay for kapha person because you've added agni, you've added fire to this. You have a fruit. A fruit is made up of air element. And now when you cook it, now you've added heat element to it. Now it is okay for vata. Does it make sense? The summary is Ayurvedic nutrition focuses on nourishing the body, mind, and soul. The goal is balanced dosha dhatu elimination and agni. And of course, important concept is pran. Ojas is anything that ojas is defined as immunity. Food should increase pran, increase immunity. We consider the 5 elements: 3 doshas, 6 taste, 3 gunas, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. And I'm just going to ask you a question before we leave. So, you have a client, and they are a kapha client, and it's spring, and they have a lot of nasal congestion. Will you give them wheat and dairy, or will you give them hot tea and honey? Exactly. Okay. Let's say one of you lives in California, or somewhere it's a hot climate. Would a homemade food have more pran, or would a local oranges would have more pran, or something that flew in from Texas would have more pran? What is the thing with the home? So first option is homemade bean soup or khichdi. Second is organic oranges locally. And third is something that flew in from Texas. Yes, Heather. Local oranges. Yeah, exactly. Yes. I think you are ready for your quiz number 1. I've covered everything. And why is it the same thing that I mentioned about mushrooms, the sattvic, tamasic, rajasic? One of the reason we don't want people to eat so much animal-based food, mushrooms and eggs. Oh, animal-based food, sorry. Increases tamas. It increases dullness and heaviness. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed it. That was a long class today. And I'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have any questions, this time very quickly, all the questions you have, please put it in AC 102 forum. So now we're in a different course. We finished AC 101. All right, have a good day. Bye-bye.